I'm Brian Howlett here with Pro Video Coalition. I'm talking to Tim from Masterbuilt Lenses. Last year at Cinegear, we saw a couple examples of their new lenses with a lot of flare, large format, full frame capabilities, large apertures, some very interesting flare and interesting lenses. At Cinegear 2019, they showed two lenses. Now, Masterbuilt is talking zooms, a full kit of their soft flare and their original version of the Masterbuilt flare lenses. So let's dive into this interview.
Hey, Brian, Tim here from Masterbuilt. Met you last year at Cinegear, basically when we had the first three Masterbuilts. Come a long way from that day. Just a little about me. Before making the lenses, designing and manufacturing and starting Masterbuilt, I was a camera assistant for 12 years and a camera operator for 8 years. That's been an incredible help in designing the lenses, manufacturing them, and also talking to cinematographers and understanding what they want from the lenses. And last summer, basically, is when we started Masterbuilt and had the first designed 6-lens set of 18, 25 mil, 35 mil, 50 mil, 85 mil, and 105. And that's when the first, trying to think of the first show they went out on and worked on. Oh, they went out on the iPhone commercial, the first iPhone 11 commercial, actually, that July. And from there, it's been absolutely gangbusters of how many people have been using them, how many camera houses have been buying them, and how many DPs have been looking to use them for projects. And it's been wonderful, and we've been developing the lens line, and we brought on Lisa Harp to help make it a real company and not just one guy navigating dangerously around and making more mistakes. So here's Lisa.
Hi, Brian. Lisa Harp, and I have been around in this industry for just over 30 years. I started at Panavision Hollywood. I was there for 28 years. I went to Area Rental US for 1 year. And of course, the love of optics has been ingrained in me from my very first day walking into Panavision and working with some of those amazing lens technicians, designers, there, which was just fascinating. And now Tim and I are trying to navigate this crazy machine forward and just enjoying every day. We have some pretty exciting new things, I think, and that's where I would turn it over to Tim, the master.
Yeah, since you saw us at Cinegear, yeah, the company has really become kind of its own animal and running off by itself. And you know, the things that we have developed since then, it's have been absolutely correlated to shows and DP's requests and camera houses. So a few things are, this is the classic Masterbuilt lens, the first thing you saw at Cinegear that day. Yeah. So that's it. Obviously, you can see it from the stainless kind of look and the polished front, all of that. And then the next thing we came up with was the soft flare set. So I wouldn't say this is brand new. It's been out working on shows. It's been sold to some camera houses. What these do, as opposed to the classic, is the classic has a hand-polished front. This also has a hand-polished front, but the soft flare has a single layer vintage coating on it. You can see the purple, the magenta, the green on it. Maybe not so well here, but we have examples coming up in our PDF booklet that we're going to show you. This single layer coating creates, the flares are still there. The DNA and the characteristic and the personality of the Masterbuilt are still all in the soft flare lenses. What these do is they soften the edge of the flare and they soften the contrast. They don't result in any elimination of flare or any reduction in contrast. What they do is soften both, and they soften the edges. So it still gives it the Masterbuilt look, but just a kind of more gentle side of it with highlights, contrast, and flare structure on the edges. And people most likely use these in tandem. They'll use both sets at once. We did create this for a TV show, an Apple TV show called C. That's their biggest TV show currently shooting. They're shooting season 2 and 3 in Toronto with 2 wonderful DPs, Michael and Brian. And they came to us in pre-production and said they wanted to look at the Masterbuilt. They said last season was shot on Leica Thalias and Arri DNAs. They liked and disliked something about both of those lenses, the Leicas and the DNAs. They gave us some notes, and we sent them the first classic set. They looked at that, they loved it, and they shoot on Alexa 65, incidentally, 5 of them with some LFs for their aerial drone unit. So coverage was a consideration, sharpness was a consideration, personality and character was a consideration, as well as flair. So when they got the original classic set, they loved them. They were already in at that point and committed to shooting the show on Masterbuilt, as well as some other DNAs I think they were using at focal lengths, but majority on the Masterbuilt. One consideration they had is they said, you know, in Toronto in the winter, you would get these whiteout skies. You wouldn't get blue skies. And the Thalias and some of the DNAs would tear up. You know, they just wouldn't hold the resolve of those. And when they tested the Masterbuilts, they did. So after shooting tests in their pre-production, they gave some notes and we came up with the soft flares for both DPs, asking for some consideration so they could use them in tandem, especially when they shoot multi-camera and one camera might have to be on a fringe and see straight into the sun. They wanted to be able to kind of strategize and work in the look with a gentler kind of characteristics that are in the soft flare. So we've come up with the soft flares, and then we've also created zooms. Again, the personality of the classic Masterbuilts are in the zooms, the hand-polished front that we have. This is a 3x compact zoom. It's a 25 to 75 T4. It's for full frame and large format. We're coming out with 3 more zooms. One other thing is, this is brand new. We have not released this yet. This is a 100mm T14 portrait lens. This is our only lens that is actually all black and all the markings are white. So it harkens back to very vintage lenses from the 30s and 40s because that is the kind of image it actually makes. It's made for large format portraiture, and have some examples coming up for you in this PDF booklet. We think it's a really nice specialty lens. And we have, not here because they're in prototype manufacturing right now, the Ultra 65 lineup. And that's made for Alexa 65 Open Gate and IMAX and Super Panavision. It creates an incredibly large area to cover for sensors and film formats like IMAX and Super Panavision, and also in digital with Alexa 65 Open Gate. We're such a small company, and we're so absolutely naive and ignorant to think that if somebody requests something, we go ahead and start making it right away. There's danger in that. And we've kind of fell flat on our face a couple times, but we've never actually given that product away or showed it because we knew it wasn't up to our standards. But when a cinematographer or a production or a camera house comes to us, we kind of, I mean, we're like really kind of like the prom girl at the prom that nobody dated. So she's going to say yes to the person that walks up right away. So we never say no. We kind of say yes to every idea and we'll try it. And then we'll show it to the cinematographer. If it works, we're really happy. And then we'll see if it's enough for other cinematographers and we'll continue the line. So being small gives us a chance to be nimble and execute right away. So when a cinematographer or camera house comes to us, we listen intently, we sit down, we really want to listen to what they say, and we go forward because we figure if these are the people like blazing the path on new images, and we get, and to tell you the God's honest truth, we have the luxury of working with amazing cinematographers that are working on really great bigger productions that people are anticipating and seeing. So I mean, we're lucky, to tell you the God's honest truth, we're really lucky, and that helps. both Lisa and I, for me, I mean, 12, 13 years of being a focus puller and then being an operator. So what that's given me is absolute frontline experience. So from prepping the camera and the lenses, you know, to finding a matching set, things like that, and shooting my own tests for the cinematographer, then going on set, shooting, seeing what he's doing with lighting, how that affects the optics, then going to dailies, and then hearing critical complaints or critical praise to the lens or to the film grain or to the digital sensor or what it is. You just absorb and learn so much. Not only does it give you experience in learning what you're learning, but it gives you a chance to be able to know how to speak to the cinematographer, what he's looking for, what he or she expects from optics, what he or she thinks about a format or the photography or the project geared towards those optics and towards that format. That's what that's really given me. And it's given me an informative ear, and it's given me an ear to listen to cinematographers and understand what they're saying and what they want. And I think, and this isn't a slight on bigger manufacturers, you know, but Zeiss or Canon or Sigma, they create lenses for the masses. At the end of the day, we're not going to make 1,000 sets of lenses. Unfortunately, it's not possible. Everything is made, designed, and manufactured in Los Angeles. It's not cheap. It's not easy, but it does give us resources and a pulse on the industry that I have to say very, 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 very few, if any, manufacturer has. We're creating lenses for cinematographers and very, very discreet looks that they're creating. We do a lot of testing photographically on stills. We do a lot of testing on different sensors. We usually test Venice, Airy, and Red. We don't stick to one sensor. So that's also important because Zeiss, you know, they calibrate and they create lenses towards the Sony sensor. I mean, these things are somewhat, you know, public knowledge. A lot of manufacturers create their optics towards a sensor, so it gives them one way of doing one thing and how it looks. But we work with all the camera houses. We work with every manufacturer. In fact, we work directly with Sony and Red. We do a lot of our demos, public demos, at their facilities. And we try to find a look that's more about the optic than the actual sensor, because the sensor has its own look. The sensor is film stock at this point, you know, and the lens is how to control that film stock. So that's what we're doing. So we test, and then obviously we go to a projector. We check line pairs, we check critical data, we check fall off, we check, you know, centering, we check spherical aberration, chromatic aberration, all breathing, all those things, you know, but our best friend is truly the camera. This is basically our history and background. Before I started designing and manufacturing optics, I was a focus puller, I was a camera operator, but also I rented lenses, you know, had the tune of about I've had to the tune of about 300 different lenses, mostly vintage things, Leicas, Canon K35s, FDs, Zooms, Nikons, some vintage Panavision glass, some historical Cook glass, things like that, some Baltars, some Super Baltars, and I would rent that out to all kinds of shows. There was a movie shot in 2018, released in 2019, Joker, and that cinematographer depended heavily on a lot of the lenses I had, and kind of also going through them with Airy and tuning them, doing some things. Maybe tuning's not the right word. It's modification of the optical path to fit his needs for Joker. And Larry is the cinematographer, wonderful, wonderful, incredible cinematographer. And he was happy with the lenses, but you know, some of the comments he had was, you know, I'd love to just be able to, for the lenses to be assistant friendly while I'm still getting my look, and as well as having uniform f-stops. On that show, he used a lot of Leicas, some Nicors, some Canon FDs, some DNAs. So you can imagine it's a hodgepodge of f-stops, close focus, front diameters for the assistant to work with, matte boxes, focus scale falling all over the place for follow focus and Prestons, things like that. you know, and a lot of cinematographers said, we would love some kind of uniformity in the function of the lens, meaning the mechanics, the f-stop, and the look. You know, not so much the look, because the look, you know, everybody wants a different focal length to have a different behavior. So we came up in that summer of 2019 with the first classic Masterbuilt set, the ones you saw at Cinegear. And that was basically from a request of creating these lenses. You know, I didn't know I'd make more than one set. We didn't know that, but they took off. So that's kind of the history of them. And it was just answering large format needs. There's still a lot of confusion in large format, I think, of what covers, what doesn't cover, what looks right, what doesn't look right, and basically coming up with a set that's uniform. Well, this is about all the Masterbuilts, and this goes back to what we said that, you know, at the beginning is you saw them at Cinegear, you know, just basically a year ago. And from that point, we've created 4 more lens lines, you know, the zooms, the Ultra 65, the portrait, and the soft flares. One thing, even during this COVID crisis, we haven't stopped. All our vendors, all our suppliers, and we've continued to develop and kind of innovate during this time. We haven't stopped. I've been shooting tests. We've been kind of looking at all different items. We've been speaking to DP still. We've been doing Zoom conferences. We've been dropping off lenses to them to test and getting feedback. So we haven't stopped during that time, which I think is pretty important. So we do kind of, development is really important to us, and innovation, and then executing it. Really nothing stops us from 2 in the morning, you know, going into our shop and kind of working on a lens or working on an idea. And that's why everything's in Los Angeles, and that's why everything is private and kind of very small onto itself as a company. So this is kind of gives you a good prototypical sample of the Masterbuilts. So in that green box, you have the center of the lens, or the part that you've fine-tuned to get into sharp focus. This was taken on a Fuji GFX 100, which is a 100 megapixel medium format 3x2 sensor, which is bigger than OpenGate Alexa 65. And the 85 covers that. Now, what you're seeing is you could actually zoom into her eyelash or her pupil of her eye, and you would still maintain sharpness. And what that, and we strive for that with the Masterbuilt. But when you get outside that green box, and even as you see her hand, and even as you see her elbow back there, and you see the highlight of her hair in the background, what you're seeing is a fall off to it. Where in large format, you have less depth of field. So you have the concentration of what the background is, but there's less kind of concentration to it. So you're getting this 3-dimensional look to it with the fall off. You're getting the concentration in the center, or wherever you put the focus. Say if you're shooting 2-3-5 and you want to put the actress or the actor straight to the fringes of the right or left frame, you would be able to get that sharpness right where you want it, and everything else to fall off. That's the personality and character of the Masterbuilt. People want flare in the lens, but they're very, very specific in the behavior of the flare. They want it to look real. They want it to look organic. Look, an artificial flare is not only kind of unrefined and ugly, but it can take you out of the story. Because if the sun, just like this photograph, the sun is exactly at 12 o'clock. So it's hitting the lens exactly dead on, okay? And you just can't create that in post correctly. I don't care how good it is, you know, you're seeing it. So we have hand polished fronts, you know, like some of the K35s, they had hand polished A-spheres and fronts. So this is the classic Masterbuilt. And what you're seeing here is just a flare coming from, with no matte box, hitting the lens right on. It's not distracting. It's not manufactured looking. It's very real and organic to the actual image and where the actress is standing and where the sun is hitting the lens. And what you can't fake with an organic or real flare in camera is also the shadow and the contrast. And that's what you're seeing. That's why this is black and white. And also you see how it affects her. So you see her hair, you know, it's almost on fire, and the street is probably 2 to 3 to 5 stops over her face. What you are seeing there, though, is a softening in contrast because of how we polish the lenses and the character of the Masterbuilt. it's glowing more than it's blowing out. And that's that digital look you get when your waveform's at past 100 or just zeroing out, you know, it's flatlining. That's that ugly digital look you get. So this gives it a soul and a texture, so you don't get that digital look. Again, it's just real. It's more organic. It makes the image look like it has life to it. This is a 35 on an Alexa LF. This is a screen grab. So what's really important about this is there is so much mixed lighting temperature in here. I mean, you're talking about street lights, sodium vapors, you're talking about the city lights in the background, and then the light hitting her is just a tungsten, small LED tungsten panel to bring up her face in the shadows a little bit. What's important about this is there's really not we didn't do any post work here. We didn't clean it up or anything too much. The skin tone's the skin tone. Her hair always looks like that. Her lipsticks always look like that. The trench coat looks like that. And the city was a little foggy. It looked like that. So what that is a lot of major manufacturers have a lot of multi-coating to the lenses. And what this does is prioritizes the light rays, RGB, into hitting the sensor. And we go back to manufacturers calibrating to one sensor. So then you get kind of, if you use that lens that was calibrated to a different sensor, you might have an image that has more of a green cast to it or a red cast or a blue cast to it. The Masterbuilts have a polished front, so they're all hitting it at one time for better or worse. So you get a colorimetry to the image that's, again, more lifelike or more organic, more real. There's a time and place for that mass manufactured lens that has that multi-coating to it. You know, that's just not really the market we serve. So yeah, this is a good example of that. And then, so that's a 35 classic. Okay, this is the new 100 mil portrait lens. So what this is doing, this lens was created to harken back to basically the 30s and 40s of portraiture photographs, like a George Harrell, people that actually use 4x5 or even bigger kind of glass negative plates to shoot portraiture for MGM or Paramount, things like that. And this lens is very much like that. What you have is what people call a Petzval background. It's this swirly background. The center is just super sharp, but her hand, her hair, her shoulder, her background, everything is just falling off to this soft kind of look that glows and kind of just permeates throughout the image, what's not in the center. Smeared is a word people use for the Petzval, you know, but what it is basically we're exaggerating the kind of optical path. So you're getting this kind of distinction of the in focus area and out of focus area to create a dramatic effect. The DNA and the characteristic of the Masterbuilt is still there. And you'll see when we go to the page, the flare is still there. And when you stop this down, it's a whole different image as well. Yeah, but this is a Masterbuilt lens through and through. Every lens we make is a Masterbuilt through and through, and we're just kind of creating a series that's different to serve a different purpose. So super technical. What the gist of getting to this coverage and format is basically Masterbuilt from Super 35 to IMAX. We can cover all those formats with different series, but why we made this format chart and didn't use anybody else's is there's a lot of, what's the right word? There's a lot of comments, there's a lot of commentary on what lenses cover and what lenses don't actually cover. And we don't just use a projector because a lot of our lenses actually supersede and overwhelm the projector. So we go to using cameras and negatives and 4x5 cameras and the Fuji GFX 100 to show us. So the Ultra 65s, which are in prototype manufacturing, we don't have here. We actually cover at 21 mil at T1.8. We cover that 3x2 format and IMAX. I don't think there's any other manufacturer at that wide field of view or that f-stop that does that. But you guys can download this PDF, and this coverage and format chart will be in there, and you can refer to it. But what do we want to talk about or at least touch upon on this format chart real quick with you, Brian?
I think since we had the C500 Mark II out, the LF, I think these are, I know in my area, these are cameras that are have become very popular very quickly. So a lot of people looking for that lens, because I mean, they're just not a whole lot of full frame cinema lenses out in the world, other than like some Zeiss that people may like and not like, whatever, it's their own opinion. They're looking for that lens that kind of gives them that edge, that that look, you could say. And I think it's in many ways the Masterbuilt is maybe something they may be interested in for those specific cameras. I'm droning on. I'm going to shut up. So
Sure, no, you're absolutely right. So yeah, the full frame format, which is basically that blue box. Some people call it VistaVision.
Mm-hmm.
Some people call it full frame. Some people, so on the Monstro 8K, that is the full frame blue box. Canon C500 Mark II, their full frame is that blue box. Alexa LF and Mini LF is that blue box. What else? Sony A7 is that blue box. Canon 5D series, Nikon D800 series, Panavision DXL, and Sony Venice. So for calling it full frame or VistaVision, every Masterbuilt lens surpasses full frame and VistaVision from the 18 millimeter all the way up. So 18 millimeter 1.4 shot wide open supersedes and goes a little past full frame. So we have all that covered.
So when you're on like a 65 millimeter IMAX, you're getting all of that image circle. So you're seeing maybe more of that characteristics on the edges.
Well, see, we manufacture for that format. We manufacture the Ultra 65 lenses just for that format. So we are actually mapping out the fall off towards that.
So the 65 you have for that, but the rest, the ones that even showed like the 100 millimeter portrait, all those characteristics would show up in that blue box.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. So our aim for the classic and the soft flare line is the VistaVision and Alexa 65 format. So the fall off and everything you see is, I guess, for lack of better words, mapped to that. Okay. But you will see the effect and characteristic of the flare and the contrast, and also some of the fall off on Super 35. We've had people use these on Super 35 that absolutely love the image. You know, people still use K35s on Super 35. People still use, use FDs, use the old Leicas, things that were built for full frame and VistaVision, but they use them on Super 35. The characteristic is still there.
It's interesting too, like some people, when they move to full frame or large format or VistaVision, they might be seeing, more of, it's funny to see, like they might see more of the lens and might like or dislike what they see.
Sure. Yeah. I think from my experience, they like it more. I mean, cinematographers at this point are more adventuresome, it seems like. They're more excited by optics. They're more accepting. They're more embracing of the look because, listen, producing content for Netflix, for Amazon, for commercials especially, I think cinematographers want unique images. I think they want images that not jump off the screen in a bad way and distract the story, but, create a look, create something that's a signature to them. Every cinematographer wants to, from the 30s, from Greg Toland, from Citizen Kane, from, Billy Wilder movies, from a lot of cinematographers always wanted their own look. And a manufacturer that really kind of heeded that and came into their own with that was Panavision, where they listened to the cinematographer and they gave them what they wanted.
It's interesting that we're kind of talking about people looking for that look, that something they can play and mess with and define as their own. It's, when cinematographers had the chemical process of cinematography, I mean, if you go back to the American Cinematographer magazine, a lot of time is spent on the chemical process of pushing, pulling, leaving the silver nitrate in. I don't have very much experience with it.
I graduated from film school in, hold on, let me do the math.
You're gonna date yourself now.
Hey, I'm comfortable with it. I still have a little bit hair left. Yeah, when I was in film school, the photochemical process was incredibly, incredibly popular and pretty much led or kind of really popularized by kind of Spielberg and Janusz Kaminski, and how they would do skip bleach bypass, you know, or kind of not wash the negative, or shoot it in such a way, you know, and then print it to a different kind of format, or shoot on Kodak and print to Fuji. That was a big thing. That capability has kind of been taken away by the homogenized sensor of digital cameras, which isn't a bad thing, you know. It does give a more even playing field, where the cinematographer now, the paintbrush very much becomes the optics and the lenses.
Yeah, yeah. So everyone's looking for their recipe for an image that only they can deliver, and sometimes they don't want to talk about what they're using to someone like me, but they, because they want to stay unique, they don't want everyone to copy them. And lenses it's kind of the way to do it now.
Sure, it's the paintbrush. I think lenses and optics are the paintbrush. You know, I'll tell you someone who kind of saw this really firsthand in the 90s with music videos was Lisa, when she was at Panavision Hollywood. They were, I gotta think, they were the mecca for really, really, really strong, incredible directors. David Fincher, Spike Jonze, Michael Bay, all those guys pushing the envelope with images in movies and commercials and music videos. And you got to see a lot of that, Lisa, right, on what they would do with optics at that time. That was the early days of kind of stuff.
As he was saying, a lot of experience dealing with these really strong directors in chasing this like look, this recipe.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Especially with the early music videos. I mean, back in the day where they would literally melt sugar cubes at the top of the film, and, you know, just every single trick in the toolbox to give them that distinguishing look. Now, with the even playing field, these lenses are giving cinematographers a tool and the opportunity to have their own signature look on the digital front without having to rely on the chemical process.
Are you, in your experience with this company and talking to cinematographers, are you hearing much talk about look? Are you hearing much talk about data? I don't know. Like, what's your experience?
It varies. Metadata was a big word for a while. That sort of dropped off the line a little bit. It feels almost like it's coming full circle back to the look. Everyone, you know, you want it to be an enjoyable image on the screen, and that's the cinematographer's job. And, you know, where my experience is always been to be able to provide the cinematographer with the tools to do that. And being able to react and play within the optical path with all these different sets of lenses now has enabled us to deliver to specific cinematographers their different needs, so that they have something that they can utilize that hasn't really been, you know, that hasn't been used 100 times earlier.
Talking about look, we have a whole set here. It's a classic, the original classic Masterbuilt lens. And some people, let's say they're taking an old vintage lens set, they might not have the whole set, or the set might not match as well. You know, I think of old Pancros where the 75 can turn a little yellow, but you want to use that look. Here, you guys have the entire line. How do these match together? Are these, if you throw a 35 on and a 135, do you expect the same color and everything else?
That was actually the first criticism and comments we got of people shooting larger format with vintage lenses, or just shooting vintage lenses. And a lot of my experience from, oh my gosh, I think I have, you know, I probably have every single set of vintage lenses that are kind of popular out there, from Super Baltars to FDs to Nikons, K35s, Pancros. And the one common thread between all those lenses is there's caveats to everything. So people absolutely adore the Canon K35s. We'll take that as an example. The 55 is always yellow. The 18 always sucks. The 35 never matches anything else. The focus and breathing is always bad if it's in the original housing, almost unusable.
Yeah.
When they are redone by really good companies, there's still caveats to the optics to them. You can only do so much with the optics in there, what's happened to them over the last 40 to 50 years before they got in your hands, the abuse they've taken, the scratches on them, things like that. You can't remedy those things, you know, but still, all that given, the Canon 35s are probably some of the most cherished lenses out there. But what you do take away from that is, at the end of the day, they're not readily available. If something happens, you don't have one of the focal lengths. There's not a 100 in the set. There's not a 135 in the set. There's not this or that. You're hodgepodging things. What the Masterbuilts do is kind of take that vintage look, what the flare does, the characteristic, the personality of the lens, and gives it a modern and uniform kind of set. So yes, the 18, the 25, the 35, the 50, the 85, the 105, the 135 all have common fronts. They're all 114 millimeter front. The focus and iris always fall in the same place. The look of them, the color rendition is the same. The contrast is the same. The flares are, you know, kind of different, obviously, because every focal length is going to have a different flare from the field of view and from the front element, concave and convex. Where they do differ in, I guess, what you'd say look, and we aimed for this and we designed this into it, is we designed these very much like still lenses. So Leica or Canon, you know, way back in, say, the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, they never developed still lenses as a set. You know, they made a lens here, they made a lens there. You know, Canon FDs in the early 70s, they created a 55 and an 85 A-sphere lens first, because those were the things they could tackle first and really compel them to make an excellent optic. Leica in the 60s came up with a Sumulux 50 f1.4 that really hit the mark and did well. They didn't set out to make these set of lenses that had uniform f-stops. They were all over the place. But what came from that was behavior of every single focal length was different. So when Leica went to make a 24 or a 19 millimeter, they didn't make it look like, or homogenize it to look like the 50 or the 75 or the 80. They thought people would shoot the 24 or the 19 to do wide shots or landscape shots, or to have somebody in it full length. You know, they didn't envision someone shooting close up with it. So it wasn't maximized or optimized for that. That's the same thing we do with these. So the 25 millimeter behaves differently from the 135 millimeter, very intentionally so, because the 135 most likely a cinematographer is going to shoot a close-up with it, and that's what we optimize it for. And the 25 is going to be made for a wide shot or a full-length shot. So the behavior of the lenses very much follow the traditional way a cinematographer would use that field of view and that focal length.
Okay, so now we have the soft flare set.
Sure.
Which is
so the soft flare follows all the same rules, all the same DNA traits, all the same personality. All it's doing is creating a different flavor of the flare, so the edges are softer, the contrast is a little more gentle, and the shadows are a little more gentle, but everything's still in there. I mean, they're not a huge departure. Nothing in the Masterbuilt line is a huge departure, I would say. But the soft flares are definitely the closest thing to the classics, and people usually use these in tandem together.
So you would be able to bounce between a set of classics and a set of soft flare if you're on the show?
Yeah, again, there was that show, C, and the Apple TV show, and they use 5 Alexa 65s, and there's times where I think they might be rolling that many cameras, as crazy as it sounds. And what you're inevitably going to get, right, you're shooting in 180 degrees. You're not going to shoot cross coverage, most likely, in a kind of show like that. Even if you do, someone's going to end up inside of an 18K, or someone's going to end up right in the sun, or someone's going to end up in a stage where there's a light hitting them, you know. And if that flare is just too much to handle for the classic lenses, you know, they're going to probably go to the soft flare lenses. And that's how we came up with those, you know.
Okay.
But like any product, you develop something and the cinematographer will find a way to take that product and do something only he or she wants to do with it. So there are some people that actually prefer the soft flares over the classics. There's people that prefer the classics over the soft flares. It's our job and our function to give them the choices and let them artistically find what they want to do with the tools.
Now we have these some more image here. The classics here that we're looking as well.
Mm-hmm.
These are similar to like the same scene in 25. The 50 is the same scene as we saw earlier, and I'm taking this 105 is as well.
Yeah. So what we're trying to prove here is the sun is all in the same place, the shadows are all in the same place, and you have a highly dynamic contrast here. That's why they're in black and white. You can see that we preserve all the contrast. You know, a lot of people go, oh gosh, I just want to get away from contrast. I use low con filters. It's just the digital has too much contrast for it. Well, yes and no. Our approach is we want to soften the contrast, because with large format especially, contrast is resolution, and you are trying to capture resolution, especially when you go back in post. Yeah. So you could take any of these images we have here, and we haven't sweetened them, we haven't graded them, and you can crush that black, and that black shadow will be 100% as black as you saw it that day on set. Where you get some people that use either heavy low kind of filters, or they do something to the contrast and don't capture it on set, and they go in post and they try to crush that black and they just can't bring it back, or the skin tones start taking on a green or a red veil. So you're kind of fighting yourself because you didn't capture it on set, or you didn't have the lens that would capture it. If you zoom into that 35, that'll give a good example of a look of one of the classics. So here now, you get to see what you haven't seen yet. An example is bokeh and background at night. So you see her, she is absolutely sharp sitting where she is, you know, but that left side of the frame, and you're kind of picking it as a cinematographer, and you're saying, you know, I want concentration where she is and nowhere else. And that left side of the frame just gives you this really gorgeous, subtle, gentle fall off to create this three-dimensional frame. And I think that's so important in full frame and large format cinematography. Yeah, and you really get that kind of example here.
And you got the cat's eye, which we see a lot of in the Aries signature primes as well, where that light's coming in.
Yeah, so the cat's eye is usually on the fringes. In the center, it's going to be more round, and it's because it's on the fringes and you're seeing the fall off. It's going to give you more of a cat's eye, like even kind of like anamorphic does.
But it's very common to see that, especially the larger formats that we get into.
I mean, it's the frame is, and you correct me if I'm wrong, it's intriguing. It gives you a lot to look at. Your eye doesn't want to look away.
Yeah, you're kind of going around and around because, like, you know, it just has that feeling of like a James Bond film or something like that. And I don't know, maybe not, but
no, it has a three-dimensionality to it. So what, like say on a James Bond film, what they're doing, they have incredible production value to dress and to close down locations to be able to have this depth in it, you know, and for the lens to be able to capture that depth, that's important, and to create three-dimensional kind of look to it. And that's what Masterbuilt, that's a big thing of what we do.
It's funny, when my eyes take over, my mouth gets speechless because I'm a visual person. So I'm like,
Let's hope in a good way.
Yeah, it's in a good way. I'm looking at I went to art school, so I'm also like looking at it in maybe a slightly different way. Like my film school is an art school, so you had to do all of it.
And, so you're taking passes at this frame. You're looking first at one thing, then another thing, then another thing.
Yeah, I've looked at it like 10 times now.
Yeah, it's intriguing. I like frames and optics that create an intriguing frame, you know, and I think a lot of cinematographers are looking for that. They're almost hearkening back to how still photographs were produced.
Yeah, it's got to have that layers of complexity and also at times be simple enough to glance at it and see it.
Sure, exactly, yeah.
And in this frame also, even with the 35, you can see the lines, and you know, there's no curvature of the frame. All your lines are standing up.
Yeah, you're not seeing that characteristic wide lens.
Distortion.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we saw a bunch of black and white, and we saw the classics. Well, let's look at the soft flare and let's look at it in color, because I think sometimes color can reveal a little bit more in an image.
So go to the one of her in the car. This is a 25 millimeter soft flare. And
this is shot on, what was the shot
on? That's Alexa LF, I believe, screen grab.
Okay.
So what's important about this and why we're in color now is a lot of manufacturers will try a second line or a third line of their already existing lenses, say the Zeiss Supreme Radiance or the Sigma Classics. I'm not judging one way or another. So what they'll do to get more flare to the image is they'll do a different coating or a coating on a different side of the element, the rear or the front or something like that, but they're still using the coating. So that what that's going to do is when you get a strong flare like this, it's going to veil its color of the coating through the entire image.
Yeah,
where
so
this does, the
Radiance, like
Masterbuilt doesn't do
blue.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, strong blue. And
So
that's like
what
very
we're
distinct
doing is
look.
we're preserving the colorimetry of the entire frame, and the flare does its own thing, and you can see all its different colors structured individually on its own. While her face and skin tone is still her skin tone, her shirt is still white, and the door of the car is still black.
So this would be helpful if you if you don't know what you're going to be facing on set and you want something other than like a blue, because the Supreme Radiance is very blue. It's like a tea blue flare. I did like one of these with Zeiss, of course, and they showed plenty.
And you know what? That's a very desired color and look.
Yeah, but sometimes that look, that color is not needed. Sometimes you want something green, sometimes you want something reddish, sometimes you want something, you want to be able to kind of choose. So if you point for example, I'm thinking in music video, if you're pointing a light at the lens to get it to flare, and you want red, then the Zeiss Supreme Radiance may not be the lens you need, because it's going to make it difficult to produce that wavelength.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So we haven't given it a blue look or tried to emulate any other thing, really. We're just giving it, that's the natural look the lens has with the soft flare.
And it's also a good example of how when you get to peaked, it's not just going, and you see some of that peakness and the edge of like the trees, but it's not like some cameras where it's just
yeah, you never, I mean, we never want to blow out the image to where it flat lines and it washes everything out.
Yeah.
We want it to have the structure and the elegance of the flare.
So this 85 we see at the top right, we're seeing like a reddish round. Is that a flare I'm seeing?
Yeah, you have the sun is right down the barrel of the lens here. So you're seeing green, you're seeing pink, but it's going towards the spectrum of also that time of day. This is the last daylight of the day, so it's very amber.
And so there's no matte box, that light is just coming right into the lens, essentially.
Yeah, there's no fill on her, so you're kind of, the sky is kind of, we're not preserving the sun or anything, but this is all meant to be so we can capture it just as natural as it can be.
Okay. That's it. And that's a soft flare that we're seeing.
Yeah.
So if you were to shoot this in the classic versus soft flare, what kind of difference would we see? I bring this up again just because we're here again. So
sure. So what you might see in the classic is you would see the actual trail of the flare kind of more come diagonally across the frame instead of like this softening of the flare.
Okay.
The blooming of the flare.
And here we have kind of that Toronto experience that you're talking about where the sky whites out.
Yeah. So we're not tearing up the sky. So what you would see in some of those is you'd actually see the tearing of the sky kind of. This isn't the greatest example because we probably should have had fill on her, but you're still preserving the skin tone. That's what's important.
Yeah. I mean,
it's natural to it.
Go out by themselves. I mean, hey, people making films by themselves right now with as little crew as possible. So you need lenses that can help you achieve your goals without a 20-person lighting crew.
Yeah. The importance of this one is just kind of keeping that skin tone neutral and keeping it true to the actor or the actress.
Mm-hmm.
Even when you have to kind of, if you don't have fill or negative fill or a light, it's, even if you do, you just want that skin tone to ring true all the time, no matter what the circumstance is.
Yeah.
And all the Masterbuilts give you that, but you see that even with this blown out sky, we're not getting any kind of veiling or ghosting. That's what we're containing with the soft flare there.
And here we have the 50 shooting into the sun as well.
Yeah. And you see how the flare is basically, you know, it's more gentle to it. And even in her hair highlights and things like that, and her hands and the contrast, you still have all the texture of the sky on the left-hand side and the right-hand side, her eyes, her hair, you know, but it has a more gentle look to it.
So, and like in the classic, this would be like you'd see the edges of this flare that's across her
Yes.
mouth region and across her shoulder, which could obstruct your view, couldn't it?
I don't know about obstructing it because it's where you put it, but it'd be more delineated, that's for sure.
Okay.
You'd see the structure of the flare more defined.
And here it just has that softness to it. So
Yeah, it has that magical glint to it, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you still see her skin tone and her, I mean, we're cheating a little bit because we have an incredibly wonderful model where the skin tone is always really good, but still, I mean, between her shoulder, her hand, and her face, you're still seeing a lot of the skin tone is the normality to it and the naturalness.
I forget what director said the best directing you can do is casting.
Yeah.
It's true, you know.
Yeah.
The best cinematographer is a really good location scout.
Yeah. There's a lot of truth to that.
And now here's the portrait lens. And here is a really good example of the swirl focus background, not out of focus background, isn't it?
Yeah. So you see, I'm not going to say this is a specialty lens, you know, but this is a T14. So now you have that, what people call that Petzval look to the swirl background, but you see her face, her eyes, her lips still have that sharpness, her necklace, everything that's on that axis, then everything else is really melting away. This is an image you'd see from the 20s or 30s in an old MGM or Paramount film on like a Marlene Dietrich or a Claudette Colbert. I mean, you really see it. You see it harkens back to a time where portraiture was really important to studios and to actresses and actors.
How easy? I mean, because you talk about the Petzval lens, and that's not an easy lens to focus itself. Yeah. Now this is just a regular cinema lens, so you would be able to pull focus on this. Like
this is it. Yeah. No, we've created it so there's no kind of compensation for any of that. Yeah, Petzval lens is almost impossible to use, you know. So we still have the T14 stock. You still have the full focus, you know, the front's still 114, PL mount, LPL mount, Panavision mount available. Yeah, this is absolutely everything. Every lens we make, we're not going to put it out unless it's 100% useful, even if the image is some kind of magical look that the cinematographer wants. We still have to put it in a package that is usable for the crew.
Yeah, so that's I think a really good thing to mention is like some people online who might not be full production cinematographers, but like, you know, smaller might be like, well, I can get this with a cheaper Petzval lens, is by a F&H. But yeah, but you can't really use it in a format where you have movement, you know, like you can't focus it. You can't have the cinema, you know, the mechanics of a cinema lens either.
Yeah, I mean, also it's like, listen, I understand if you're a one-man band and you're going out with your camera and that's what you can do to make your art. That's wonderful. As long as you're out making images, it's wonderful. But I do know how important production value is even to one-man bands. They want to emulate the look of a $300 million movie. You know, there's no question about that.
Yeah.
So it does come back to the tools sometimes, and do they get more in your way or do they let you just kind of do what you're doing?
Yeah, and
I'm not saying that you need a full-on, you know, lens that you can pull focus and hit marks perfectly and all that every time, especially if you're just doing it yourself and you're on the barrel. You know, you can kind of get through it and do what you want to do. But, you know, when it comes to recreating a cinematic look and, you know, doing a story where it takes time and craft, I really believe you want the tool that has kind of no caveats to it.
Yeah, yeah. And now that you can rent it, these lenses are available for rent. If they're not rented out on a film, you can take it out, but you can still go out and shoot on your own or with very small crew and repeat. Repeating is the key, being able to repeat the shot so you can
Absolutely
get it right. God knows I've repeated shit way too many times. But we're droning on. I'm droning on. Let's get back to this beautiful example of the portrait lens. We have this like little magenta flare coming through.
So
Look at
this
that
is, yeah,
background.
this
Look
is
at
a pretty kind of extreme example of the portrait lens. So not only are we, we're using it at T14, but there's light sun coming, hard sunlight coming straight into the lens. So your contrast becomes softer, everything becomes softer, and it's more exaggerated. But it's, I mean, that's a portraiture look of the 30s and 40s for sure.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when you stop down, it creates I mean, it's from 1.4 to 2 to 2.8, it looks like a different lens.
If I'm going through these examples, because here is a 2.0 and a 2.8. Let's talk about it. Let's go. We did 1.4. Here's the 2.8. 2.0. So you get, it's not quite the same example because the sun is not going into the
Sure.
lens.
But you still have that swirly background. You still have that concentration of her in the middle there. Her eyes, her hand, her lips, all of that are really sharp, but her hair is really kind of falling off. The hair in the foreground, the hair in the background, and then the background in her hand itself. It's just, portraiture is all about, seeing the beauty in the eyes. And that's what you're getting, is like the center concentration of that lens.
And now let's go up to 2.8 here, where it is
2.8 kind of, it defines itself totally differently. Her elbow and shoulder on the left is totally kind of out of focus and soft, and so is her hand that's pulling her hair on the right side. But her face is just absolutely, the contrast, the definition, the sharpness is all there. And then that background, you just have that kind of beautiful fall off to it.
It's got a good commercial feel to it, like a beauty commercial or something that you might, with a small crew, be out in New York City with a Steadicam trying to capture something like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I could see that. I could see like just, a beautiful model in a gray metropolis urban background with this kind of stuff, I mean, you see that in fashion, still photography and magazine photography all the time. And they really kind of try to aim for this look, but they try to do it in post, these glowing highlights and the beauty of the model and just the softness of the edges.
It's something like you can just deliver what they want without spending on the money in post or fixing it in post or whatever. Fixing, maybe not fixing, but you know what I mean. Now we have the Ultra 65s.
Yeah.
So we're talking a whole different format here.
So the Ultra 65s are, we've passed the prototype stage. We've proven them. There's 4 focal lengths. It's a 21, a 29, a 45, and a 65. Those 4 focal lengths, those 4 sizes become really important to cinematographers. They're kind of 4 really magic sizes. The 21, obviously it's a nice wide, but the 29 becomes something that between 25 and 35, where those are 2 very prototypical, very formal focal lengths, it just gives you, 29 lets you do something where you can get close to a person like 3, 4, 5 feet away from them and still just have a really nice look to them, to actor or actress, and then have this wide scope of the wide background to them. So the 29 becomes a really magical kind of focal length. Same with the 45. Obviously a 50 is great. A 50 is a 50, but a 45 behaves very differently, especially how we make it to a 50. And you'll see some of those looks when we go back to the PDF. And then the 65 is just another great thing. Say you want to shoot like an 85, tight close-up of a person, but you still want some background to it. The 65 becomes really, really important. All that said, these are designed for large format, not full frame. They're designed for IMAX, Alexa 65, Open Gate, Super Panavision, but these can still be used on full frame as additional focal length. They're still T18, so that makes sense. And they have a gorgeous, gorgeous look to them, which is so important. So we have a cinematographer now that's about to start a show, and he's just taking classic Masterbuilts, and he's taking Ultra 65s to balance out more focal length. And he's just shooting Alexa Mini LF.
Let's go. Let's see some examples of this
Sure.
Ultra 65. that we have. Let's start with the
You want
21.
to start with a cityscape at 21? Yeah.
Yeah.
So all these are shot on the Fuji GFX 100, which is a massive, massive, massive sensor, bigger than Alexa 65 open gate.
Hmm.
So 21 T18 lens is not something that's out there.
Yeah.
You know, Mamiya, Hasselblad, Airy for their Alexa 65, they don't have this, you know. We beat them in wideness of field of view and in stop. Nothing comes close to this. So what's important to look at in this frame is you have a street going one way on the left-hand side, going straight 12 o'clock. You have another one going 3 o'clock on the right side. And then you have 4 buildings all kind of converging. You don't see any distortion. All
Yeah,
the windows are straight. This is what your eye would capture in that scene, which is very difficult for a wide lens because you have to correct so many distortions and so many converging kind of optics that would create an image that might otherwise be unpleasing or unreal to the eye because of the distortion. You know, what you might get on a typical lens this wide striving for such a big format is the 2 buildings on the edges would kind of bow into each
Yeah,
other.
they go in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that just makes it takes away from the reality. It takes away from the reality, you
Yeah,
know,
it does.
especially if you're shooting a wide master, you want it to be reproduced the way your eye would see it or as close to that as possible.
Yeah, there's a time and a place for that, you know,
Weirdness.
distortion, but you know, so it's not always desirable. I mean, nice, clean lines.
And you're still seeing fall off. That
Yeah.
tree is probably 40 feet away and the building's 500 feet away. But because of this large format and because of the lenses and even the railing of that street, you're still seeing out of focus areas on a 21 millimeter lens.
Yeah.
You still have perspective control, which is why photographers and cinematographers choose large format.
I'll be honest, it's hard to even tell that it's, I mean, you can tell it's a T18, but it's just so sharp on the edges with this building, especially the one on the right. Like, to me, I feel like if I were to take a 21 T18 on a Nikon Z6 or Z7, that would begin, depending where I focus, I would have problems with the focus on the edge of the frames.
Not only that, this 21 mil on this large format basically equates to like a 12 millimeter on Super 35. So this field of view is really astounding.
Yeah, I can imagine it is. Yeah.
You know, that building is not too far away. I mean, that building is 200 feet away. That tree is 40 feet away. That railing is 10 inches away.
I think what's really interesting is the size of the crosswalk signs in the bottom right-hand corner give people a perspective of how far
Yeah,
away.
yeah.
Because you can see that a car is lighting it up, I think. We all know that size. That's like 4 feet tall.
Yeah.
You see it from corner to corner. Let's go to, that's astounding for a wide lens. Let's go to the 29 now.
Yeah.
Now we're going to that softness of the flare that we see in the soft flare and a little bit in the classic. Is that right?
Yeah. So what's beautiful about this is it's a 29 mil shooting, I mean, chest to head, you know, there's no distortion on her. And you get, what you're getting is kind of a close concentration on an actor or actress's face and their body movement, you know, but you're seeing so much of the background. And you still have perspective.
How far away is she from the camera?
Hmm?
How far away is she from the camera there?
I'd say that's 4 feet.
Okay, that's what
3 feet, 4 feet.
3 to 4 feet.
Yeah.
That is close to, and
Yeah.
still be able to see that wide.
Yeah, and still not distorting any facial features.
And you can see the little bit of that sun flare in the bottom left-hand corner of the frame over her arm, but it's not. It's like that kind of slight flare. So it's like the soft flare. It's not taking. It wouldn't be too harsh.
So all the Ultra 65s have the same single layer vintage coating of the soft flares.
And then now we have. I'm going in order here.
Okay.
Now we have a direct in the sun, 45 millimeter, and she is at what? She's about 5 feet away from the lens there.
No, that's about 3 feet, like
Okay.
kind of shooting up. So you see how this arm basically trails off and it doesn't get in focus, but her face is perfectly sharp. Same with that building. This is
Yeah.
all really close to each other.
So this would be across the street building in LA.
No, that building, she's on the sidewalk of that building.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So what you're getting is that compression of large format, kind of very much close to how the eye perceives anamorphic in that 2x compression.
And it's too much. I
A
like
classic look.
now we actually see the sun and we have that flare, but we don't. We have the multiple colors that we see. We see a little orange, a little blue. We actually see the RBG rainbow.
Exactly. That's because we're letting the light do its own thing. We're not prioritizing anything.
Yeah,
then we
it's the
have-
peacock flare.
It's the what?
The peacock flare.
Peacock flare. Is that industry standard? Because I would not know that.
No,
Okay.
no,
I feel like it could be.
that's a COVID produced vocabulary word.
It's the Rona. Because it's Nashville. It's the Rona. Corona. So now we have the 65.
Yeah, the 65 is a really special focal length. I mean, early on in the 2000s, manufacturers really kind of caught on to this. I believe in the mid 90s, and Lisa can correct me on this, Panavision came up with a Primo 65, and it was a humongous hit. Cinematographers loved the way it would kind of behave and act on actors and close-ups. It's so versatile. You can still have kind of background scope to it, while, especially in large format, while you're still shooting beauty and portrait shots of the subjects. You know, you just look at her, again, really kind of cheating here because she's a gorgeous model, but I mean, you do get the kind of flavor of the lens and what it's trying to do, you know, with the hair and the highlights and the lips and the eyes. You know, you're creating a kind of an intimate look to the lens, while you still can still see we're in downtown. The sidewalk is trailing off, the street's on the right-hand side. You can still get some background, and we're really close to her right now. We're probably 4.5 feet away, 5 feet away.
And you have that inside the action close up.
Yeah. And that's what the 65 gives you. You know, then Arri came out with the Master Prime 65, which was a huge hit. You know, Cook came out with a 65. But one thing is the outlying 65 that people absolutely love, but it's really hard to find, is a Zeiss Super Speed 65. It has the focus of a 50, which is awesome. And then you have the behavior of a 65 at 1.3. So that's kind of what we're trying to achieve with the Ultra 65 millimeter focal length.
It seems like the flare on this one is a little, maybe it's in the angle light's hard to see. Maybe it's a slightly more controlled. Am I wrong there? I might be wrong.
No, we have more control of not pointing up at the subject because we're further away from her. So You're just not getting as much hit.
So we have.
But I mean, the image speaks for itself. You see it. I mean, it does what it does. It's inside the action. It's intimate.
Yeah, it's very much like that. You know, like a little bit like us. Kaminsky likes to be inside the action of stuff and close to the subject, but still have that look of a longer lens.
And a lot of those lenses, you know, a lot of those projects he shot. And I mean, you know, obviously Kaminsky is an incredible craftsperson and artist, but the force behind him is Spielberg. You know, Spielberg is very much the architect of every single look you see in his films. Not only from, you know, the lighting, you know, I mean, you know, Schindler's List, there's a lot of that where, you know, it's Spielberg operating it. Spielberg has a lot of thoughts on the lighting, on the camera operating, on the framing, and still to this day. And a lot of those use Panavision Primos, and you saw that in Kaminsky's work. So seeing that kind of gives you a chance to grow and kind of develop and expand on that with these lenses. But more and more you see that their look got more aggressive throughout the years. You know, obviously, when he started using Spielberg, I think, yeah, Schindler's List was the first thing he used him on. Then Jurassic Park was somebody else. Then I think, you know, Amistad, Minority Report, War of the Worlds, all of those kinds of things, Munich, all had more distinct flavors and looks to them.
Yeah.
You know, and that just shows the trend of cinematography and how much they wanted to push the envelope. And that obviously in turn kind of pushed their kind of influence on other filmmakers.
Now that we've talked about all these lenses and the way they make us feel and the way they make us produce images. I keep looking at the 65 millimeter and the 45 millimeter here, and I'm just like insta cinema. Like you don't need to do anything else. You made it. You made a movie.
No, they have. Yeah, I mean that's what you want from the lens, right? You want an image that speaks to an audience. You want an image that kind of that gives you a look, that gives you a distinction. That just the cinematographer knows they're going into a project where, you know, they can create an art that matches what they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, I also got to say, and I'll send you this so you can put it on the screen, but the model is the same in all of these, and she is absolutely wonderful to put up with a hack photographer that makes you stand still for wide open at very, very small focuses. But she designs most of these shots and does her own hair and makeup and everything. And she actually shoots and has a lot of her images shot with the Masterbuilt on her Instagram, which is Jessica Vaughn Productions on Instagram. And I'll send you that address. So anybody who wants to see some more Masterbuilt images can look on there.
So now that we've talked about all these lenses, how can cinematographers get these in their hands?
Okay. We sell directly. Everything is designed, manufactured, and shipped from Los Angeles, California. We've sold all over the world now, Brazil, London. We're moving into territories we had no idea. A lot of camera houses have them or are getting them. Keslow, White's, Kerner Camera, Otto Nemens, DPs are buying them. There's a gentleman in Nashville that has a set. What's the name of the camera house in Nashville, Lisa?
DB Rentals.
Yeah, Doug Bates. Right? Yeah, I know Doug actually.
Yeah. So cinematographers are buying them. Cinematographers are renting them. We rent them. The camera houses rent them. We demo them. Our philosophy is we don't want these lenses on the shelf. We want them out in cinematographers' hands making images. We didn't build them to sit in a box.
And if it's like a cinematographer has a need, what do they need to do? They just need to send you a message.
They can email us. They can email us, contact us on Instagram, everything. We're not a big corporation in an office building where emails get lost or we think somebody else is going to field that email. We're on it right away. You know, I mean, you're not talking about weeks or days of an email going by where you don't get an answer. You know, even if your question is, hey, I'm in Toronto. Is there a set available in Toronto next Tuesday? Yeah, there's a set in Toronto at White's. Or, hey, we're shooting in Los Angeles. Who has these? And if we need an extra focal length, or what's the difference between this and that? Can you send me tests? We're happy to do, and that's our job, is to do all of that. So we're a small company, and you know, I wouldn't say we're inundated at times, because that's not no company should ever be inundated. You should be able to have enough staff or enough effort and support to make sure everyone gets an email or a phone call back. So yeah, we rent them, we sell them, and we can point you to the direction of camera houses near you that might have them. And we also demo them, and we try to send out demos as well.
Okay. Is there anything we're missing?
You know, it sounds funny, but something I want to mention, and because of the world we're living in, is you may have noticed this. So because of this, what we do is every lens that leaves our shop, be it for a demo, be it for a rental, be it for a sale, everything is manufactured and put together and assembled with every piece the technician is wearing gloves, and every piece is rubbed down with laboratory grade acetone. And it takes a long time. And then once it gets to the final piece, basically, of say this lens, and everything's done under a bench with UV light to also protect from that. This lens is rubbed down with laboratory grade acetone from the optics to the metal to the PL mount from head to toe, and then hermetically sealed in plastic. So if you get a demo from us, or if you get a rental from us, or if you buy a lens from us, you will be the first person after this plastic is taken off to basically touch this lens. You know, we're trying to mitigate anything we can and give you the absolute safest possible resolution to getting lenses in your hands. And we've been doing demos and tests, and I've been sending these out to cinematographers, mostly locally here in Los Angeles, that say, hey, can I test them or look at them? And every time they get them like this, they go, is it wrapped in plastic because of the COVID? I said, yeah, we want to take every precaution possible. So while this seems a little bit kind of funny looking or over dramatic, it's how we're doing everything. We don't care when COVID's over, we're still doing this. This is how you will see every lens from Masterbuilt.
Yeah, it's good to be safe, and it's really nothing, no little measure is too much. You know, wear a mask and keep everything clean, and no one wants the guilt of making someone else sick.
Yeah, you know, especially all our lenses are handmade, everything's put together. They go through quite a few different kind of assembly lines and processes. So we want to, after every process, after every assembly one, we want to make sure wherever it came from, it's been absolutely sanitized and sterilized.
I mean, how about this? How much is a set of the soft flare?
105,000.
105,000. Okay, and how much
For
is
6 lenses.
For 6 lenses, and how much per set for the classics?
The classic six lens set is 92.
Okay, so we didn't even touch on the zooms. Now I love primes, but because I'm a news guy, I tend to have to live on a Zoom. I live in a Zoom world, so I'm a little surprised to see you guys making zooms.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't want to. Yeah, but you know, you get on a bigger show, you get a cinematographer that says, you know, hey, I got remote head stuff, I got car to car stuff, I got a director that wants to move quickly, I got to get zooms. You got to figure something out. The zooms are great, so we'll have 4 eventually. Right now we have 2. Right now we have 2 compacts. They're 5 pounds. They're small. They're 3 times zooms. One is a 25 to 75 T4. Covers full frame. Has the DNA of a Masterbuilt. Has the hand polished front. Has the same 114 diameter. You know, everything kind of matches up. The other one is a 45 to 135 T4. And the other is a 70 to 180 T4. Those are all about 5 pounds in compact zooms. Then there's an 11-pound studio zoom, and that is a 25 to 125, 5 to 1, at a T32, and that's full frame. So we hope to have those soon. Those will be in limited numbers, and those mostly go to people who are already using the Masterbuilts or have Masterbuilts out rented through a show. And they need to basically add a zoom just because they have to have that.
Yeah. When can people see footage from a zoom or anything like that?
We will have a lookbook on the Zoom next week. We will have basically separate lookbooks, one for the classic lenses, one for the soft flare, one for the zooms, one for the portrait lens, possibly next week, and we can send them to you and people can download them from your site.
This is a nice long video. It's a lot to talk about, a lot of lenses. It's been amazing for me to see you with a few lenses from June to have made this a really great company, making essentially like lenses that cinematographers are just drooling over. And to have a set in Nashville, I would say is I'm going to have to go to Doug Bates and check him out in person.
Yeah. Again, you know, I'm not going to say it's all it's not all skill. I mean, it's I gotta say it's more luck than skill, but we're really, really fortunate to have absolutely wonderful cinematographers that have embraced these, that have given us input, that have given us feedback. Sometimes very critical, but all very important, and had camera houses that are wonderful to work with and also support us and kind of give us feedback and let us know what the next things they're looking for and their clients are looking for. And yeah, it's Lisa and I have just we've kind of been riding the wave, and before the entire COVID thing, we were on an absolute tear. It was no way we were keeping up with demand. So this kind of lull in the action, we're trying to catch up as much as we can and innovate as much as we can. And thank you for getting out the word. You know, that's really what's so important, is just people willing to talk about it and give us a chance to kind of present it, for better or worse, that this is our product. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't, but this is what it is.
Well, you make your own luck, and you guys have made quite a bit of luck, and you guys make wonderful lenses. Thank you for taking the time. And I can't wait to see you in person. Hopefully in October. I don't know.
Hopefully.
Maybe. Yeah. We'll see.
Well, if they have Cinegear in October, we'll make a concerted effort to be there.
Okay. And if you're not at Cinegear, I might find a way to make it to your HQ and see if we can spend a little time with you there. Okay.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you so much, Brian. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Likewise. Thank you guys for everything. Thanks to the two of you. I can't wait to see some more looks out of this, and you'll be safe.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.